So the main argument of my talk today was to talk about the issues that I think affect whether we can become a learning organisation and some of the factors that constrain it. So I wanted to talk about how leadership ultimately defines the way that the organisation will operate and how that impacts with cultures within the organisation. So not only the leadership culture, but also the performance culture that exists in an organisation and also the general organisational culture, because I think that's, again, is what drives whether we are able to learn from not only mistakes and near misses, but also learn from successes. Then wanted to talk a little bit about you have to put some proper processes and structures in place and how challenging that is. I think most forces are doing that individually to one extent or another, but in my national role, it's really thinking and asking the questions about how we learn from force to force across the country to make sure that for the service we are making the improvements that we can make. And then it was really to put it into context, because we operate in a very difficult environment. Most of our interactions are quite complex. They involve people all the time and often are under pressure. So we're not in a very controlled environment. And then you have to think about those other things. We are a disciplined service, so there is always the issue of misconduct sitting in the background. So how forces operate their professional standards will have an impact. And then when you go independently, you've got the Independent Office for Police Complaints, or Police Conduct, should I say, who are then looking at where we as a service operate. And if that is a very sanction-based approach, then that clearly is not going to encourage people to come forward and talk about failures. Similarly, we're inspected by Her Majesty's Inspectorate, and again, the way that their performance culture works at a national level, comparing force to force, giving very binary gradings in many senses. Again, is that encouraging people coming forward to talk about things that may not have gone as well as they should, or is it more encouraging for people to be able to pass the tests that are set? And then we have the political environment, and at any given point, policing is always going to be politically a hot topic. And I think we have to look at how the service, and particularly the leaders of the service, are able to resist some of the pressures that might come politically about how we do or don't talk about whether we're successful or otherwise. Because we have to be honest about what we're doing. We have to operate without fear or favour, but sometimes that can feel very difficult. And then, of course, all of that plays into the media. We, unlike many organisations who can have their failures and learn in private, essentially, we don't have that luxury. Every perceived or actual failure of policing is laid bare, not only in the traditional media, but now in social media. And that, again, creates great pressure into the organisations, which I think counters to some extent people's desire to actually be learning organisations. So it was really laying out that challenge. Did talk about some areas where I think we are quite successful in, some discrete areas. I think we're very good at learning, but it's how do you get that across the general piece? And then I really wrapped it up, and the real importance for me is every time we are described in the media as not having learned a lesson, as not having changed, then I think that has quite a dramatic impact on our legitimacy. And fundamentally, we stand and fall on our legitimacy with the public as an organisation that is fair, an organisation that is doing the right thing. So this is really critical, and it was great to have the opportunity to talk to lots of people that operate in that. But really, I think I was putting the pressure back on the leadership of the organisations, because individually, in forces and collectively, we've got to constantly try and take on this challenge. I think the most surprising element of what I've been talking is, as I was kind of preparing it, in a sense, how challenging I became about the way that we operate. And I think, as I said in my talk, everybody, every leader in the organisations now will be astute enough to say the right things and